Hi guys, it's Claire. Welcome back. Today I wanted to talk to you about a book that I recently finished reading for Nonfiction November, and I found it so excellent and remarkable that I wanted to make a full video about it. And that book is We Were 8 Years in Power by Ta-Nehisi Coates. I'm sure that you know who Ta-Nehisi Coates is. I'm sure you've heard of this book. It seems to be on everyone's Nonfiction November TBR, but I really loved it, and I think it's just fantastic and absolutely lives up to all the hype. This book consists of 8 essays previously published in The Atlantic that cover the 8 years of the Obama administration. And lest you believe that this is just a ploy to kind of get you to pay for content that's already available for free online, each of these essays is preceded by a shorter kind of mini essay in which Ta-Nehisi Coates sets up the context for you as a reader, both in terms of where America was when he was writing that essay and also where he was kind of in his career and in his development as a writer and a thinker. And because all but 2 of the essays in this book were written prior to the election of Trump, there's kind of this tragic irony that runs throughout the book that's really just a devastating gut punch when you read it, but also something that he grapples with in these introductory essays. I think it's such a powerful book to read right now, but I also think that it will serve as kind of a time capsule in the years and decades to come that will be really valuable to help explain this era in American history and how it feels to so many people. So I wanted to talk about some of the essays that stood out the most to me in this book, and the first of those is the 3rd essay, which is called Why Do So Few Blacks Study the Civil War? The Civil War, I think, is a really fascinating and problematic thing in American memory, because when you start to study the Civil War and when you start visiting battlefields and when you start watching the Ken Burns documentary, there is so much romance surrounding the history and memory of the Civil War in a way that kind of obscures a lot of the realities of that conflict. Because so much of Civil War history seems to belong to white people, you get these kind of warped and very forgiving narratives. And what Ta-Nehisi Coates is talking about in this book is how he kind of came to become a Civil War buff and how he has read so much about the Civil War. He's visited a ton of the battlefields and has always noticed that he's one of the only Black people at battlefields studying the Civil War, and he kind of talks about why that is and why is it that kind of Black people and slaves become sort of just a footnote to a lot of Civil War history. And he kind of ends this essay with a plea to other Black people to kind of reclaim their stake and ownership of the Civil War as their war, and to reclaim that history and sort of tell their own history of that war that might be able to kind of break down the mythology of the Civil War that is so persistent today. What I think this essay so exemplifies is something that you'll find throughout this book, which is that Ta-Nehisi Coates does not buy into America's myth about itself, and he is constantly trying to kind of break down our idealistic and easy and comfortable interpretations of American history. But at the same time, he also understands the power of storytelling, and that's why he wants more Black voices talking about the history of the Civil War. Different voices can fundamentally change and shape the way that we understand our own history. Then I wanted to talk about The Case for Reparations and The Black Family in the Age of Mass Incarceration, which are both much longer essays that run about 40 to 50 pages in this book, and they just include a lot of really rigorous and thorough research and analysis on the issues of mass incarceration and the issues of sort of housing inequality and a lot of other structural inequality that has persisted in America. I think that these are topics that I kind of started to learn about when I was in college, but by no means learned about when I was in high school. And these are really devastating pieces that I think should absolutely be required reading in American schools. And I think that these 2 essays are critical crash course examples of all of the ways in which inequality and systemic inequality and government encouraged inequality have persisted since the end of slavery through Jim Crow and after the civil rights era to this day. And then the essay, My President Was Black, is, I think, one of the most stunning and remarkable essays in this book. I think much has been made about the sort of differences between Ta-Nehisi Coates and Barack Obama and the ways that Ta-Nehisi Coates has criticized Obama for being more conservative than he would have liked the first Black president to be. But I think this whole book is a testament to the sort of racism and obstructionism that really limited what Obama was able to say and do and accomplish as president. And I think this essay in particular really explores how Ta-Nehisi Coates and Obama's very different upbringings really shaped their different worldviews. And what I think really shines through in this essay is how deeply Coates respects and is almost kind of in awe of Obama, and he kind of really breaks down how Obama is this unicorn of American politics and history that kind of made him the only person who could have been America's first Black president. One thing I want to say just generally about Coates' writing is that it's really beautiful. So much emphasis is placed on his ideas, and when you actually read it, you're reminded of how wonderful his writing is. The beauty and clarity of his words, coupled with the power of his ideas, contribute in equal measure to the overall force of this book. I was kind of thinking that while I was reading this book, and then at a certain point he talks about that, and he talks about reading James Baldwin for the first time and being astonished by his ideas and by his writing, and how in his own writing life he really strived to achieve something similar, and he really believes that the content and the form of the writing are equally important and go hand in hand in reinforcing each other. So in conclusion, I can't recommend this book enough. I urge you to go out and read it today. And if you have read this book, definitely let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.